Hello everyone and welcome to the channel. I'm Emmanuel, I'm a Boeing 737 pilot and a member of PMDG's tech team. Welcome to video number 2 in our series of learning how to fly on VATSIM. In this particular video I will talk about some resources that you can use in order to familiarize yourself with the basic radio phraseology and some basic ATC operational procedures. So, there are several sources of information available where you can actually start learning your basics. However, I would recommend you to start with the VATSIM Learning Center, like the one we have looked at previously. You are going to find a lot of interesting information in this one, and there are another couple of sources that I would briefly like to talk about, and that is the real-life sources that real pilots also use to learn their radio phraseology and procedures. So, being a German, of course, I'm going to start with the AIP Germany. Now, AIP is the Aeronautical Information Publication, and you are going to find basic procedures and aerodrome information and so on in here. Now, the link to the AIP Germany is included in the video description below. It is aip.dfs.de. So, in aviation English, that's Alpha India Papa Delta Foxtrot Sierra Delta Echo. And on the electronic online AIP, you will then want to head into the general section, services, and then into the communication services. Now, of course, lovely Germany is still a third world country in terms of internet, so you will actually only get your information available as a pictures. But when you click on them, you're going to get into the communication and navigation services part. Now, the left part is in German language, since this is the German AIP, but the right hand part is always in English language, and in here you are going to find a lot of useful information. Now, you don't need to read all this in order to be able to fly on VATSIM, but there is some basic information provided in here. For example, scheduled air services available from Germany, including their airline codes, which you can use to log on to the VATSIM network, and the call signs that they are using on the network. So, the call sign you are going to use is not always the name of the airline. If you look at here, for example, we have the Deutsche Lufthansa with the abbreviation Delta Lima Hotel, and they are being called Lufthansa on the radio. However, if we are going a little bit down further, for example, we see that Lufthansa City Line on the abbreviation Charlie Lima Hotel is not, for example, called City Line or something, but they are called Hansa Line on the radio. So, just familiarize yourself with the call sign that is being used for your operator. Another example here is looking at the non-scheduled services, Aerologic, who are a Boeing 777 operator. The abbreviation is Bravo Oscar X-Ray, and the call sign is German Cargo. So, the call sign of your airline you are going to find in here, for as long as it is a German airline, since this only lists German operators. Otherwise, if you need to find your call sign, just go on the Wikipedia page of the airline in question, and usually the radio telephony call sign of the airline is provided in the top right box on Wikipedia. Now, if we click ourselves through the different pages over here, we're going to find some basic information, like, for example, the English language shall be available on request of any aircraft at all stations on the ground servicing designated aerodromes and routes used by international air services. Now, that applies to VATSIM as well. Wherever you are, English language is the basic that has to be used. Now, many countries are going to offer service in the local language as well, provided it's allowed in real life. So, for example, talking about Germany, it is not allowed to conduct instrument flights under German language, so English has to be used at all times. But for example, if you are doing flights under visual flight rules, German language is allowed as well. In other countries that's different. For example, in Russia it is allowed to use Russian language for the instrument flights as well, just like in most southern European countries. So Spanish is allowed as well, Portuguese is allowed, French is allowed, but that is different by country. In general, use English if you're under instrument flight rules, and that is always going to be the approved language for operation. Note that flying on VATSIM, the air traffic controller can at any point tell you that they don't speak the native language, then you will have to speak English with him. So if we are clicking ourselves through the AIP over here, we are going to find a lot of useful information that you can read up one day if you start long-haul flying on VATSIM. However, the really important information that we'll have to find in here is the information about the actual phrases being used by air traffic controllers. Also nice to know over here is the call signs of aeronautical stations. So that is basically what the air traffic controllers are being called. For example, in here we can see that somebody who has the prefix control is an area control service, but he doesn't have radar. Somebody who's called radar is an air traffic control service with radar. So for example, over Germany in the upper airspace we would usually find Rhein radar, so we know that they do have radar available. However, that is really stuff that you don't necessarily have to be aware of, but that you that is just nice to know. So, transition of letters, we've talked about that earlier on with the phonetic alphabet. That is also something you have to be available with, or that you have to be familiar with. And over here we have the same on the pronunciation of numbers. And what I do find very helpful over here is the pronunciation in English. Like, you have the number O, and in English it's called 0. So that is really helpful in order to learn the correct pronunciation. As for example, the number 9 over here, as I told you, is 9R. So 9R. Or 3 is 3. Similar over here is 100,000 decimal for the dot and stuff like this. Alright, next up is the pronunciation of radio frequencies, and that is given in here as well. Can only recommend you to learn this one by heart. So, if you have, for example, 118.000, it is permissible, and actually it is normal, to pronounce this one as 118.0 and then leave the last 2 zeros out. However, if there is still a different number than 0 at the end, so 118.005, then it actually has to pronounce like 118.005. So that's something that you just should be familiar with. Going on then, we have our radio phrases. Now this is where things really do become more interesting. Note that in here they are always given in English and German language. Keep in mind we're still in the German AIP, but you should know at least basic information, like for example, what does acknowledge mean? How can you confirm something, like saying affirm? And these are just some basic words that you should be familiar with. However, be aware that you don't have to know all of them by heart, because most of them are actually fairly obvious. Like for example, cancel something, or cleared for something, or confirm something. Contact, correct, that is like self-explanatory stuff. However, what is very important for you, especially in the beginning when you're flying on VATSIM, are those over here. Say again, which means repeat all or the following part of your last transmission. So you can use that one when you have not understood a message that an air traffic controller has just transmitted to you. So let's say, for example, the controller goes like, Airplane 123 cleared Domox 3 Alpha arrival. You didn't understand that, right? So then you can say again. So then the controller is going to repeat the message. And if he's still going, Airplane 103 cleared Domox 3 Alpha arrival, then you can say speak slower, which means reduce your rate of speech. So those are some very handy tools for you, especially at the beginning when you find it hard to understand the controller. Do note that there is no need to be ashamed whatsoever to use those phrases. So if you don't understand something, tell the controller. If you still don't get it, tell him to speak slower. And if you still don't get it, you can, on VATSIM, you can always say, please use text. Then the controller has to type it into the text box and send it to you as a text message. That is, of course, a phrase that you are not going to find in the real-life AIP. Also important down here is the unable phrase, which means I cannot comply with your request, instruction, or clearance. So if the controller tells you anything that you don't know how to do it, tell him that you're unable. So just answer, for example, Airplane 123, unable, and then the controller will know that you cannot do it. So what's very important for the basics over here, if any air traffic controller is telling you to do something that you don't know how to do, tell him that you're unable for it. Or if you're initially unsure and you have already made your readback and then you realize you cannot do it, tell the controller as soon as possible that you're not able to do what the controller asked you to do. Once again, there is no need to be ashamed whatsoever if you are not understanding something or if you're unable to carry something out. VATSIM is a learning environment, and it is not expected from anyone that they are capable of doing everything right from the beginning. Even after too many thousands of hours flying on VATSIM, as well as a couple thousand hours flying in real life, I do still occasionally have to use those words if controllers want me to do something. So it does happen. There is absolutely nothing wrong with it. What is wrong is not to know what you have to do or not understanding what you have to do, but not telling the controller. So a controller who knows that you will have to get an alternative clearance can work with that. If you, however, do something that you are not supposed to do, and you don't tell the controller that, then the controller is going to be surprised by your actions, and that is going to lead to further issues. So if you don't know what to do, tell them that you don't know what to do, and that's it. So let's go on then with the actual phraseology. That is something that you should have a general look over. You don't need to know like every single one phrase, but you should be available, or you should be familiar with a couple of the basic phraseology, like taxi or report ready for departure, how a takeoff clearance looks, and something like that. Be aware that there are two parts in the AIP. First of all, we have aerodromes without air traffic control. So those are useful phrases that you can use on Unicom and VATSIM. And then, of course, we have, starting over here, aerodromes with air traffic control. And these are the phrases that we have to use over here. In the following couple of videos, I'm going to go over a full flight and what it may theoretically look like. And I'm going to use many of the phrases you are going to see in here. And, however, I will also use a couple of slight deviation. For example, in Germany, you are basically asking for an IFR clearance by requesting startup clearance, while in the rest of the world they are probably not going to understand that you're looking for IFR clearance by asking for startup. Now, that much about the AIP Germany and as a useful tool of information. Note that it is very handy to continue clicking through this and having a look at the general phrases. As said, you don't need to learn them by heart unless you're a real pilot, and even then, I tend to say that you will probably find some phrases in here that even I haven't heard of. Let's quickly talk about another really handy source of information in case you don't like the AIP Germany, and that is the AIP of the United Kingdom. Now, if you Google for Charlie Alpha Papa 413 Radio Telephony Manual, you're going to find the Radio Telephony Manual of the UK Civil Aviation Authority. And they've made a really good job bringing up the visual representation in here, and they have some very nice ways of explaining things in here. However, you do have to be aware that in the UK, some procedures are special, to call it that way, so they deviate from the ICAO standard quite a little bit. However, if you do like the way they are presenting their information in here, in the end you can also use the UK procedures in the rest of the world, and they are going to understand you, even though it's probably not what they want to hear in every particular country. But think like here: Golf Alpha Bravo Charlie Delta, request descent, then air traffic control is going to descend, Golf Charlie Delta, descend flight level 40. And the readback, descend flight level 40, Golf Charlie Delta. So, that's just an example of how it is in the UK Radio Telephony Manual. Again, just Google for it, it's going to come up as one of the very first results. And this is, as said, the UK CAA Radio Telephony Manual, Charlie Alpha Papa 413. So, this shall conclude this video. Next up, I'm going to give you a little bit of instruction how to set up your controller client, and once that is done, we're going to head up into the flight. So, see you on the next video. And if you do like what I'm doing on my channel, I would, as always, appreciate a small donation through the Buy Me a Coffee link that you can find in the video description below.